Today I'd like to talk about happiness and why meditation can help us find ubiquitous happiness, true happiness, which is virtually independent of our circumstances. Most of us derive our happiness from pleasure versus pain, or enjoyment versus suffering. And this is basically making your happiness or your feelings about what's happening around you dependent on the differences that you see between things that you like and things that you don't like. And we choose the things that we like. We also have certain things that we're used to always having in our lives, and when we don't have them anymore, then we suffer that they're not there anymore. So a person who has their car, normally, when the car breaks down and they have to take the bus to go to work, then they suffer because they're used to having the car and being in the bus with all those people and noisy and can't listen to music as easily that they want, and it's just not what they're used to. But another person that usually walks because they can't afford the bus, when they have bus fare a particular day, then they're joyful because it was a long walk to go to work before, and now they can just ride comfortably and not be so tired when they get to work. So everything is a difference. What's the difference between pleasure and pain? Well, pain is, certainly there's physical pain, and we're used to having a body with no pain if we're healthy. And so we have physical pain, then we're unhappy because we're used to having no pain. If you're used to having pain, then maybe you're not so unhappy with that particular pain because you're used to it. So the mind is a really good difference engine. What's the difference between what's happening now and what I have now and other times? So it's really good for surviving. So we find out that eating this food makes me sick, eating this other food makes me healthy. That's good. We need differences to understand what's safe, what's not safe, and what's healthy and what's not healthy, and so on. So that's all very useful for physical survival, but it's really unfortunate that most of us are going around using this intellectual feeling mind. We're dependent on it for our happiness. And so when things don't go the way we want them to go on the outside world, we're unhappy. And when things go the way we want them to go on the outside world, we're unhappy. This is a terrible, terrible way to live because the outside world is usually going to have something different from what you really want. So now everybody thinks that's just the way it is, right? Well, it's not necessary. True happiness comes from within. It comes from something that's more fundamental than the differences between pleasure and pain, the differences between what makes you sick physically and what makes you healthy physically. Those things are important at the level of the physical world, but we can come to understandings and come to energetic levels of being that are independent of most, if not all, of those considerations. So let me think of an example. Several years ago, I had an awakening whereby I actually saw the perfect radiant beauty of all of creation in everything that I saw. And so this was a truly joyful and wonderful, ubiquitous experience. No matter what I saw, everything was perfect. Perfectly crumpled up piece of trash on the ground. It's just, you might still pick it up and put it away because it's an environmental problem, but it's not the same as saying, ugh, ugly, and having a pain in the body that creates unhappiness. It's just a subtle thing, but it's not the same thing. Now, one of the main sources of unhappiness, therefore, are judgments that aren't necessary to our survival. So, again, the difference engine of the mind is great for survival, but do we have to go around labeling things that are bad and things that are good that aren't inherently related to our survival? No, those things that we spend time judging, we're creating our own suffering to exercise the differential mind that way. And so one of the most important practices, which I'm sure I'll talk about some other time, is that of non-judgment or acceptance. But even more fundamental than that, when we tie our happiness to the thinking mind at all, then we're in trouble. We're enslaving our happiness to our circumstances, and it just doesn't work a lot of the time. Now, if you're okay with being happy, half the time, or even 80% of the time, if you're lucky, that's okay. But if you want to be happy, truly happy all the time, and happiness, by the way, is a low bar. Bliss is our true state, like a baby that has a physically healthy body and is just cooing and eyeing all the time because it's just in bliss. This is our natural state. So the conditioning of the mind, the over-exercise of the intellect to differentiate everything as good and bad, is blocking this natural tendency to be in bliss. So meditation is the practice of depreciating the intellectual mind. It's a practice of letting go of thoughts altogether that you don't need to do what you're doing in this current moment. And it actually turns out you don't need virtually any thoughts to do what you're doing in this current moment. I might talk about that in a different video, but some things we know we don't have to think hard about, like washing the dishes or even negotiating traffic to drive. We're pretty good at seeing our situations as we go down the road and keeping ourselves safe in a fairly automatic, mindful way, but it's not as intellectual of a process as, say, writing a book or a computer program. So we want to use the mind for what it's good for, but it's really not, the intellectual mind isn't really good for helping us with our happiness. It's really an impediment. And so as we meditate, hopefully some amount of time every day, we're practicing enjoying more silence in the mind and depreciating thoughts until we come to a time where when we have a thought that's not helpful, we have practice in saying, that's just a pesky thought that I'm in the habit of having. I'm not going to give that thought that much energy because it's not helpful to me. Just like a poisonous food isn't helpful for the body, many of our thoughts that we have are poison to our happiness. But we have a choice with practice. We can choose to identify with those thoughts and give them a lot of energy and suffer them, or we can have the choice of developing a habit of becoming independent of intellectually unhelpful thoughts and come to the blissful state of the baby in the mother's arms as if nursing on the breast.